The head of Peru's cabinet announced progress in the commitments with the transport and farmer sectors. The Russian Defense Ministry said the missile attack on Kramatorsk was carried out by a division of the Ukrainian missile troops from the locality of Dobropolye. Spain's Prime Minister Pedro Sánchez announced the beginning of a new stage in bilateral relations between his country and Morocco with the reopening of the border between both nations. Hi, this is From the South. I'm your news anchor, Diego Martin, from the TeleSUR studios in Havana. We begin with the news. In Peru, the head of the cabinet, Aníbal Torres, announced progress in the commitments with the transport and livestock sectors. At the end of the session of the Council of Ministers, Torres ratified the government's decision to fulfill the agreements made with these sectors. He also reiterated the executive's commitment to promote family farming through the use of new government policies and direct purchases from farmers. At the same time, the official announced the restructuring of the superintendents of land transport of people, cargo, and goods. Finally, the head of the Peruvian cabinet stressed the importance of the executive branch and Congress working together to generate solutions that benefit the citizens. And Peruvian President Pedro Castillo announced on Thursday a bill to ban monopolies, hoarding, speculation, and price fixing in order to relieve the shortages and general scarcity affecting the nation. He said this in the city of Huancayo, scene of the recent protests that have generated situations of violence with deaths and numerous people injured. The national president attended the request of the social leaders of the central Andean city, and from there he offered apologies for the statements made in the midst of the social crisis, expressed his solidarity with the families affected by violence, and vindicated the right to peaceful protest. President Castillo also highlighted the participation of regional and municipal authorities as well as social leaders in the meetings, which he assured would be repeated throughout the country. The Argentinian Senate approved on Thursday night the bill to reform the Council of the Judiciary with 37 votes in favor and 33 against, and Frente de Todos achieved an important unified legislative victory. Now the initiative must go on to the Chamber of Deputies to be sanctioned before next Thursday. The project seeks to analyze and transform the functioning of this body of justice and has been approved in extremis thanks to the alliances of two senators from Rio Negro and Misiones. Among some relevant aspects, it increases the number of members from 13 to 17 and vetoes the entry to the Supreme Court, a central point in the dispute between the representatives of the opposition bloc Juntos por el Cambio and the ruling Frente de Todos. After 6 hours of debate, the president of the Senate, Cristina Fernández, put the bill to the vote, which was passed with the needed requirements. During her speech, Senator Anabel Fernández Sagasti of the Frente de Todos considered the arguments of the legislators of Juntos por el Cambio on the independence of powers to be not very credible, as the court that they support, according to Fernández Sagasti, is the instance that least respects this principle.
Something else. The truth is that the arguments of the Supreme Court of Justice are not very credible when they claim that they are worried about the political influence in the Council of the Magistrature. In reality, what bothers them is democracy and the division of powers, and what they want is to continue empowering the judicial family, because it does exist. I respond to Senator Romero that he said that in the North it exists. In reality, the judicial family exists everywhere. In fact, in 2013, we sanctioned the law of democratic entry to the judiciary.
The Cuba-United States Agricultural Coalition demands changes and commits to work for changes in policies and measures affecting trade relations between the two countries. United States business people have acknowledged that lifting certain laws would be beneficial to both countries. They say the United States could export more than 50% of the food it produces, and Cuba could sell organic produce, vegetables, and fruit on the West Coast that would allow it to buy inputs. U.S. producers have pledged to be the most reliable source of trade. Doug Kiesling of the Arkansas Wheat Coalition, like all his fellow delegates, will battle in Washington for a change in the muzzling rules. A few hours ago in Honduras, the meeting of the public transport drivers who are on strike and the high-level commission led by President Xiomara Castro ended in the midst of a transport strike that also included blockades and threatened to generate violence. The president sent a message to the transport workers who had paralyzed their activities since the early hours of morning. The president offered a high-level commission to address and resolve the demands mostly related to the fuel crisis, but called on them to reestablish service. Pedro Arquero, a member of the government's High Commission, said at the end of the meeting that important agreements and commitments had been reached.
There are several important aspects that happened today. First, to clarify that this government is the government of reconciliation, dialogue, and open doors. It is not necessary to hold sittings or go on strike to establish a dialogue with us. The president posted a message on her social media profiles, clearly stating that until the strike was lifted, there would not be a negotiation. So the friends of the transport workers took it well. They did lift the strike, and shortly after, the president called them to convene here to the official house, and we've been meeting with the representatives since 5 o'clock in the afternoon. What we agreed was to establish 5 work tables, one for each of the transportation companies.
We're going to take a short break now. Please join us again after this. Hi, and welcome back to From the South. At least 39 people, including 4 children, have been killed and nearly 100 injured in a rocket attack on a railway station in Kramatorsk in eastern Ukraine. Donetsk's governor Pavlo Kirilenko revised an earlier estimate of 30 killed and said many of the 87 injured were in a serious condition. According to the statement from the Donetsk Regional Defense, the Ukrainian military carried out the attack when they were preparing to evacuate the civilian population, an operation that had already begun. After the violent attack, many people went to the train station, some said to help the injured and others to leave the city. Ukrainian presidential advisor Alexei Arestovich claimed that Russian troops attacked the area with an Iskander missile. Meanwhile, President Zelensky repeated the accusation against Moscow, but claimed that it was a Tochka-U missile. The Russian Defense Ministry reported that the missile attack on Kramatorsk was carried out by a division of the Ukrainian missile troops from the locality of Dobropolye, 45 kilometers from the city. The ministry added that the Tochka-U tactical missiles, the remains of which were discovered near the Kramatorsk railway station, are only used by the armed forces of Ukraine. According to the Russian military, the aim of this offensive was to prevent the mass evacuation of residents from the city in order to as human shields to defend positions of the armed forces of Ukraine, as in many other cities in the country. Russian presidential spokesman Dmitry Peskov confirmed that his country has suffered significant losses of troops in Ukraine as the military operation enters its 44th day. Speaking live on Sky News, Peskov said that more than 1,000 military were killed and nearly 4,000 were injured since the start of the operation. His comments followed Russia's expulsion from the United Nations Human Rights Council on Thursday. Precisely 93 of the 193 members of the United Nations General Assembly voted in favor of the removal of the country, which followed allegations of mass human rights abuses by Russian troops in the formerly occupied town of Bucha in northern Ukraine. The presidential spokesman denied any suggestion that Russian troops were responsible for the killings and claimed that images of civilians murdered in the town were staged. Venezuela rejected the suspension of Russia from the United Nations Human Rights Council and reaffirmed its commitment to the founding document of the organization. At a meeting of the UN General Assembly on Thursday, 93 members voted in favor of the diplomatic rebuke, while 24 were against and 58 abstained. This met the required threshold of a two-thirds majority of the Assembly members that vote yes or no, with abstentions not counting in the calculation. Venezuelan Foreign Minister Felix Plasencia stated the decision to suspend Russia from the Council will affect multilateralism, threaten security, and world peace. He also denounced that the illegal and coercive measures imposed on Russia do not contribute much to maintaining peace. China firmly opposes the politicization of human rights issues after the United Nations suspended Russia from the Human Rights Council on Thursday.
China always calls for promoting and protecting human rights through constructive dialogue and cooperation on the basis of equality and mutual respect. At the same time, we firmly oppose the politicization or instrumentalization of human rights issues, oppose selective and confrontational approaches as well as double standards on human rights issues, and oppose exerting pressure onto other countries in the name of human rights. Dealing with the membership of the Human Rights Council in such a way, we would set a new and dangerous precedent, further intensify the confrontations in the field of human rights, bring a greater impact on the United Nations governance system, and produce serious consequences.
The head of Chinese diplomacy, Wang Yi, reaffirmed before the French president's diplomatic counselor Emmanuel Bon that the origin of the Ukrainian crisis is in the lack of balance in European security, which requires a framework of fairness and efficiency. Wang Yi stated his country is looking forward to an early ceasefire and the restoration of peace and have been making efforts to this end. At the same time, he reaffirmed that all parties should work to create the necessary environment and conditions for advancing peace talks instead of fanning flames. On his part, Bon said France has consistently adhered to an independent foreign policy and will not fall into the logic of bloc politics. The French diplomat highlighted his nation has always been committed to making and maintaining peace and is communicating with several parties, including Russia, on major issues such as Ukraine's achieving neutrality and obtaining security guarantees. World food prices hit an all-time high in March as Russia's special military operation in Ukraine sent shocks through markets for staple grains and vegetable oils, the United Nations Food and Agriculture Organization said on Friday. FAO's food price index, which had already reported a record in February, surged by 12.6% last month, making a giant leap to a new highest level since its inception in 1990. The disruption in exports flows resulting from the February 24th operation and international sanctions against Russia has spurred fears of a global hunger crisis, especially across the Middle East and Africa, where the knock-on effects are already playing out. Russia and Ukraine, whose vast grain-growing regions are among the world's main breadbaskets, account for a huge share of the globe's exports in several major commodities, including wheat, vegetable oil, and corn. Leading candidates for the French presidency staged their final campaign rallies 3 days before a vote that appears increasingly likely to result in a tight runoff between President Emmanuel Macron and far-right leader Marine Le Pen. Macron is still leading in polls of voter intent, but the gap between him and Le Pen has shrunk to 5 or 6 percentage points for both the first round and a presumed runoff between them. The finish order could pivot in voter turnout. Only the two top candidates Sunday's first round of voting will make it to the decisive runoff on April 24th, with polls showing that Macron and Le Pen are the most likely to advance, even though a surge of far-left candidate Jean-Luc Mélenchon remains a possibility. We have more news coming up after one final short break. Please stay with us. Hi and welcome back. During his speech from the guest palace in Rabat, Spain Prime Minister Pedro Sánchez announced the start of a new stage in bilateral relations between his country and Morocco, with the reopening of the border between both nations. After his meeting with King Mohammed VI, the Spanish representative revealed part of the content included in the joint declaration, emphasizing the historic and necessary moments for both countries in which this new momentum in Spanish-Moroccan relations is taking place. Referring to the document as a long-lasting and ambitious roadmap, the Prime Minister said it sealed the future agreements on economic, commercial, energy, industrial, and cultural matters. Preparations will be made to relaunch the Strait Crossing Marhaba operation, cancelled for the first time in 2020 on the occasion of the beginning of the COVID-19 pandemic, and suspended for the second time in June 2021. Authorities in the Democratic Republic of Congo on Friday said 6 people died in a blast in the country's troubled east caused by a suspected bomb. The previous toll from the explosion on Thursday in Goma, the capital of North Kivu province, had been put at 8 dead. Goma's military governor, Constantin Dima, said the blast occurred in a bar located inside a military camp. The site has been sealed off to enable forensic experts to investigate exactly the nature of the device, he told journalists. One suspected cause is North Kivu lies in a region that has been in the grip of armed groups for a quarter of a century, many of them a legacy of the Congo wars of the 1990s and early 2000s.
We saw a flame, and after a bang, I crouched behind the house and thought it was a bomb. Afterwards, we went out and we saw dead people in the bar. We don't know how many, if it was 7 or more. We don't know, and there are many injured.
I'm scared because it's something I have never experienced. To see a lot of people dead like that, it's scary for us as survivors. We just have to thank God because this is not normal.
Pakistan's National Assembly will meet on Friday to hold a motion of no confidence against Prime Minister Imran Khan. This political crisis broke out last week when Prime Minister Khan lost his parliamentary majority after the Muttahida Qawmi movement and the Awami Party of Baluchistan left the ruling coalition to join the opposition. At the same time, the Pakistani government announced the creation of a commission to investigate the alleged foreign conspiracy against the Prime Minister in the face of the no-confidence motion presented by the opposition, whereas Khan himself has openly accused the United States of orchestrating a coup attempt through the aforementioned no-confidence motion. At least 2 people died and several resulted injured in a shooting spree in the Israeli coastal city of Tel Aviv, the latest in a surge of violence in Israel and the occupied West Bank since late March. The attacker, a Palestinian, was shot to death on Friday by Israeli security forces. Shin Bet security agency said the officers found the shooter hiding near a mosque in Jaffa, just south of Tel Aviv. The attack sparked mayhem in Dizengoff Street, a popular night spot full of bars and restaurants. The bar attack was the latest in a string of deadly street assaults that have left 13 people dead and shaken the country. Officials identified the shooter as a 28-year-old Palestinian from Jenin, a city in the occupied West Bank. Heavy rain in northwest Colombia has taken its toll on the population of the department of Antioquia, where at least 12 people died in landslides and floods over the last few days. Heavy rainfall triggered floods and landslides in Abriaqui municipality on Thursday, destroying part of the El Porvenir mine and a workers' campsite, killing 12 people and injuring 10. More people are feared missing and the number of fatalities could rise. Roads in the area have been blocked by floods and landslide debris. Around the same time, flooding was reported in Medellin and Bello municipalities, where homes were damaged and around sides.
Everyone is desperate to find their relatives. You never know if it could happen to us, so we are in solidarity with the community and with all friends. According to reports from relatives and acquaintances, there are only 2 people missing so far.
We've come to the end of this news brief. You can find these and many other stories on our website at TeleSUR English. You can also join us on social media for all the latest news. We're on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and Telegram. For TeleSUR English, I am Dio Martin. Thank you for watching.
Hola, ¿qué tal?